Ciao, and welcome to Immersion Travel Italy, where we don't just visit Italy, we experience it. I'm Katerina Ferrara, travel author, blogger, and your host. This podcast is about experiencing Italy beyond the checklist. This is number 9 in the Regional Capitals of Italy series. We've been to Milan, Aosta, Trento, Trieste, Genoa, Turin, Bologna, and Venice. We're tracing Italy from north to south in this series. In today's episode, we're traveling to one of the most famous cities in the world, and this region has shaped so much of Western culture. Today, we're talking about Florence and Tuscany. This is a place that people think they already know. The art, the Renaissance, Michelangelo, the Duomo. But Florence is not a museum frozen in time, and Tuscany is not just rolling hills and wine labels. This region is built on power, money, ideas, and conflict. A place where beauty was never accidental, and where influence was earned, defended, and fought over for centuries. I usually keep these episodes between 20 and 25 minutes, but I don't think Florence will cooperate. This city holds so much art, history, and meaning, and trying to keep it concise felt impossible. And honestly, it didn't feel right to try. The episodes always start with history, then they talk about sights to see, day trips, and at the end, we'll talk about incredible experiences that you probably haven't heard of anywhere else. My first trip to Florence was a day trip from Rome on the fast train. It was me, my husband, and our son, and we did what most people do on their first visit. We saw the Duomo, we crossed Ponte Vecchio, and we saw Michelangelo's David inside the Accademia, and we were glad we had purchased tickets in advance. By the end of the day, we did not want to leave. Florence had an effect on us immediately, not because it's overwhelming, because it's so alive, dense, layered, filled with Medici history. We barely had a chance to scratch the surface, and we returned shortly after. And I've been back many times since. Once with my cousin Susie, once alone, and once to visit friends who were from Florence and nearby Fiesole, just north of the city looking down over the hills. Florence isn't a one-time city. It invites you back again and again, revealing different versions of itself each time, and you never run out of places to see, art to enjoy, or experiences in town. Long before Florence became Florence, this land belonged to the Etruscans. Built around the 8th century BC, the Etruscans had established a powerful city-state across central Italy, and Tuscany was their heartland. These were sophisticated people, skilled in engineering, metalwork, trade, and ritual. They understood this landscape, the rivers, the fertile plains, the defensive hills. They built roads, they drained marshes, and established trade routes that would later be absorbed seamlessly by Rome. While Florence itself was not the greatest of Etruscan centers, the region was deeply shaped by it. Even today, Tuscan roads, their patterns, their settlement logic, and hill towns reflect this Etruscan planning. Rome did not invent Tuscany, it inherited it. In 59 BC, Julius Caesar founded a Roman colony here named Florentina. This name means flourishing, and it was chosen deliberately. This was a strategic location along the Arno River, controlling movement between the north and south of Italy. Florentina was laid out as a Roman grid, straight streets, the Forum at the center, infrastructure designed for order and control. Via del Corso follows the ancient Cardo. Cardo is the main north-south street in a Roman city or military camp. Via degli Speziali follows the Decumanus. The Decumanus is the main east-west street. These two principal streets intersected at the Forum, the city's central public space. Roman cities were laid out on a grid pattern based on these two axes. After Rome collapsed, Florence shrank. Invasions, instability, and shifting power structures reduced the city to a shadow of its former self. Lombards, Byzantines, and later the Franks all passed through as rulers. But Florence never disappeared. By the 10th and 11th centuries, it began to rise again, driven by trade, banking, and its key location along commercial routes. Guilds emerged, wool merchants, silk traders, bankers. Florence became wealthy not through conquest but through commerce, and this fueled competition between families, between factions, and between city-states. Florence spent much of the Middle Ages fighting Pisa, Siena, Lucca, and even internal enemies in the endless cycle of alliances and betrayal. Out of this tension came ambition. By the 14th and 15th centuries, Florence was no longer just a city. It was an idea. This is where the Renaissance took shape, not because people suddenly loved beauty, but because money, power, and intellect aligned. At the center of it all was the Medici family. They were bankers first, politicians second, patrons strategically, the Medici understood something crucial. Art was influence, architecture was legacy, and ideas were power. They funded artists not out of generosity, but vision. Brunelleschi, Donatello, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci. Florence became a laboratory of human potential. Perspective in painting, anatomy and sculpture, humanism and philosophy. This wasn't art history, it was a redefinition of how humans saw themselves. Walking through Florence today, you feel this confidence everywhere. The scale, the symmetry, the refusal to be small. Florence's independence did not last forever. By the 16th century, the Medici transitioned from de facto rulers to hereditary dukes and eventually Grand Dukes of Tuscany. Florence gained stability. Later, Tuscany passed through foreign control. Spanish, Austrian, and Napoleon arrived briefly, dismantling old systems before being pushed out. In the 19th century, Florence played a key role in the unification of Italy and even served as the capital of the Kingdom of Italy from 1865 to 1871. That moment is often overlooked, but Florence was once the political center of the new nation. World War I drained Tuscany of men and resources like much of Italy. World War II was far more destructive. Florence was occupied by Nazi forces. The historic center was constantly threatened. The Ponte Vecchio survived not by accident, but by intention. It was spared while everything around it was blown apart. Resistance movements operated throughout Tuscany, especially in the hills and countryside. Florence emerged battered but intact, scarred but still standing. Today, Florence carries all of this at once. It's an art capital, it's a university city, it's a living community. Yes, it's crowded and famous, but beneath the surface, Florence still belongs to the Florentines. Morning markets, neighborhood cafés, quiet churches away from the main routes, and just beyond the city, Tuscany opens toward hill towns, vineyards, stone villages shaped by centuries of continuity. For our walking tour, let's first have breakfast at Pasticceria Gilli. Whenever we're in Florence, my husband and I always stop here first. Before we step into the Duomo, before the crowds thicken and the day takes shape, we begin the way Florence has begun its mornings for nearly 3 centuries. Founded in 1733, Gilli is one of the oldest cafes in Florence, just a few steps from Piazza della Repubblica and close enough to the Duomo that the city's history feels almost compressed into this single moment. This is about taking a pause before your day begins, standing at the counter with an espresso, watching the rhythm of Florence begin the day. Gilli has always been part of Florence's intellectual and social life, a place where ideas circulated as easy as coffee. And starting the day here feels like stepping into that, not as spectators, but as participants. In the 18th and 19th centuries, cafes like Gilli, where ideas were circulated. Writers, artists, politicians, and merchants met here to talk, debate, observe. Inside, everything signals continuity. Polished marble, mirrors, excellent displays. We order espresso, perhaps a cappuccino, a cornetto. Everything is delicious. And after that, we're going to walk toward the Duomo. Florence is dense with Renaissance masterpieces, iconic architecture, and unforgettable viewpoints. I'm trying to limit us to what we can cover in one podcast, starting at Piazza Duomo. This is a symbolic center of Florence. Few places in Italy hit you with this kind of experience all at once. The scale, the color, the density, everything is intentional. This piazza represents Florence at its most confident, a city declaring that art, faith, engineering, and civic pride should exist together without apology. We've got the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, Duomo of Florence. The cathedral itself was begun in 1296 and took nearly 140 years to complete. The facade you see today dates to the 19th century. White Carrara marble, green Prato marble, and accents of deep red. The patterns are precise, geometric, almost mathematical, arranged to draw your eye upward and inward at the same time. Statues stand in the niches. Arches frame the windows like carefully balanced art. Beneath the facade, the structure itself is medieval ambition on a monumental scale. It was meant to be the largest church in Europe at the time, larger than Pisa, larger than Siena, larger than Rome. The building was an act of faith, a declaration of power, and it truly defines the city. I want to talk about the dome, designed by Filippo Brunelleschi, that dominates Florence in a way no other structure ever has. From the outside, it rises in warm terracotta, massive and unmistakable, its curved form sitting impossibly atop the cathedral like a crown. The white ribs climb upward, pulling your eye toward the lantern at the top. You can see it from almost anywhere in the city. Florence organizes itself around its special shape. When you step inside, the scale truly reveals itself. The space opens suddenly, the dome lifts high above you. No visible supports, just space and certainty. There was no modern machines to help, and there was no existing blueprint. Brunelleschi solved the problem no one else could. He designed a double-shell dome that supports itself through geometry, balance, and physics alone. Standing beneath it, you don't just see beauty, you see the confidence of this architect. This was a city that believed problems could be solved, that intelligence mattered. The innovation was worth the risk. Above you, the interior of the dome is completely consumed by the Last Judgment painted by Giorgio Vasari and completed by Federico Zuccari. Figures swirl upward in dense, dramatic layers. Saints, angels, sinners, demons, bodies twist, the color deepens. Hell and heaven spiral around in the dome in a vast visual narrative that feels cinematic. I've climbed the dome and the bell tower, and if you have to choose one, I recommend climbing the cupola. The climb to the top is 463 steps. It's narrow and steadily ascending between the inner and outer shells of the dome structure. It's not easy, but it offers something no other climb in Florence does. As you ascend, you come in close proximity to the frescoes of the dome. You no longer are viewing them from far below. Your eye level with the figures, the movement, the detail. You see brushwork, the scale becomes intense. The moment makes this climb worth it. At the top, you step out onto the roof level and then the lantern, where Florence spreads out below you in terracotta stone, compact and intentional. Because access is limited, tickets should always be purchased in advance through the official cathedral website, as same-day availability is not guaranteed, especially in high season. I want to stop here and mention that all of this history of the Duomo is outlined in a book called Brunelleschi's Dome by Ross King. It's one of my favorite books. I keep it here at my desk. And I read it every trip I go to Florence. I read it as a preparation. It's got great medieval drama, the competition between these artists. I highly recommend it. It's easily available on Amazon. Standing beside the cathedral is Giotto's Campanile, begun in 1334, and it feels different than the dome. Giotto was not an architect. He was one of the most important painters in the late Middle Ages, a contemporary of Dante Alighieri, one of the figures who helped pull Western art out of abstraction and back toward humanity. Where earlier medieval art felt flat and symbolic, Giotto introduced weight, emotion, and physical presence. Figures occupied real space. Faces showed feeling. Stories felt almost 3D. The same sensibility carries into the tower. Where the dome overwhelms with scale, the bell tower invites you closer. Its surface is wrapped in bands of colored marble, white, green, and soft pink, arranged in precise geometric patterns. Relief panels line the lower levels, telling the stories of creation and human progress. These are not just decorative scenes. They're a worldview carved in stone, celebration of work, intellect, and human effort. Climbing it is demanding, but more straightforward than the dome. There are 414 steps, rising through stone staircases with open windows that frame Florence in fragments as you ascend. At the top, the view opens completely. From the bell tower, you see straight across to Brunelleschi's dome. Here, the dome becomes more of an object of genius. You see ribs, its structure, its logic. Both climbs are worthwhile. The bell tower gives you perspective. The dome gives you immersion. Together, they explain Florence. Our next stop is going to be the baptistry. Facing the cathedral is the baptistry of San Giovanni, one of the oldest and most symbolic buildings in Florence. For centuries, Florentines were baptized here, including Dante. This octagonal building predates the Duomo and reminds us that Florence's spiritual life existed long before its architectural bravado. Faith came first, grandeur followed. But what transformed this building into a turning point in Western art is its bronze doors. This competition changed art history. In 1401, Florence announced a competition on how to create the bronze doors for the baptistry. It was not a small commission. It was a public test of artistic vision at the highest level, and two young artists emerged as finalists. The first was Filippo Brunelleschi of the Dome, and the second was Lorenzo Ghiberti. Each was asked to submit a bronze relief panel depicting the sacrifice of Isaac. Brunelleschi's panel was dramatic, muscular, and intense. Figures strained with emotion. Movement was forceful. Ghiberti's panel, by contrast, was fluid and balanced. His figures moved naturally through the space. The composition was harmonious. He used less bronze, demonstrated greater technical control, and created depth that felt almost painterly. Florence chose Ghiberti, and that decision mattered. Brunelleschi, frustrated by the loss, would turn his attention away from sculpture and toward architecture, eventually solving the possible problem of how to mount the dome. Ghiberti would spend decades working on baptistry doors and refining the language of realism, perspective, and narrative clarity that helped define the Renaissance itself. One competition, two careers, both essential to Florence. The Gates of Paradise were the nickname for these doors. Each panel tells a biblical story using perspective, spatial depth, and human emotion in ways that have never been achieved before. Figures recede into the space. Architecture creates setting, and time unfolds across each frame. When Michelangelo later saw them, he famously said they were worthy of being the gates to heaven itself, thus the nickname. The original doors are no longer outside. They're preserved in the Museo dell'Opera del Duomo, and this is one of my favorite places where you can see art. Inside the museum, the lighting is exceptional, and you see details you would never see outdoors. Figures emerge from the bronze with astonishing delicacy. Outside, the copies of the doors will impress you, but inside you will really enjoy seeing them. The timeline of the cathedral. Construction began in 1296. Brunelleschi started mounting the dome in 1420, and it took about 16 years until 1436. Giotto's Campanile instead was started in 1334 and completed in 1359. It continued after Giotto's death, and the total time was about 25 years to build. It's probably time for lunch after visiting the Duomo and associated sites, and I recommend Trattoria Zaza. Near San Lorenzo, just about 6 to 8 minutes from the Accademia, maybe 10 minutes from the Duomo, it's one of the best managed places that you can rely on Florentine cuisine. That's why we stopped here for lunch in the afternoon. The dining room was full, but not chaotic. We ordered the classics. I had ribollita, which is thick and comforting. We also had fresh pasta with ragu, rich without being heavy, and we shared a second course. This is Tuscan food doing what it has always done, feeding people who have been thinking and walking all morning. Our next stop is Piazza della Signoria. In this piazza, you'll see Palazzo Vecchio. This was Florence's town hall, not a residence. Construction began in 1299 under architect Arnolfo di Cambio. The Republican government met here. The Signoria, later the Grand Council of 500. The fortress-like design reflects the political instability of medieval Florence. Thick walls, narrow windows, the building needed to withstand riots and sieges. Its tower rises 94 meters, visible across Florence, and a constant reminder of civic authority. When we were in town, we wanted to climb the tower, but the line was too long to wait. I recommend getting tickets in advance. You can book through the Palazzo Vecchio Museum website. The climb is 418 steps up a narrow spiral staircase, but I'm sure the views of Florence are worth it. For much of its history, Florence was officially a republic governed by councils and elected officials. But behind the scenes, power increasingly concentrated into the hands of one family. The Medici rose not as nobles, but as bankers. By the 15th century, they controlled vast financial networks across Europe, lending money to popes, kings, and merchants. Their main residence was Palazzo Medici on Via Larga, now called Via Cavour, completed in 1444. Wealth became influence, and influence became control. In 1530, after years of unrest and rebellion, the Florentine Republic officially ended. In 1537, Cosimo I de' Medici came to power as the first Duke of Florence. He moved his court into Palazzo Vecchio, transforming the Republican government into a ducal palace. The symbolism was deliberate. The seat of shared governance became the seat of central authority. Giorgio Vasari renovated the interior. Giorgio painted the dome of the Duomo. Vast halls were redecorated with frescoes glorifying Medici victories, territorial expansion, and divine legitimacy. History was rewritten in paint. Art here was not decoration, it was persuasion. The Medici ruled from Palazzo Vecchio for nearly 3 decades, but by the middle 16th century, the building no longer suited their needs. It was too public and too exposed. In 1549, Cosimo I purchased Palazzo Pitti on the south side of the Arno River. Over time, it was expanded into a vast royal residence. intentionally separated from the civic heart of Florence. To connect two power centers, Cosimo commissioned the Vasari corridor, a raised and closed passageway allowing the Medici to move between Palazzo Vecchio and Palazzo Pitti unseen, crossing over the Ponte Vecchio without mingling with the public. In 1565, the family moved permanently to the Pitti Palace. Palazzo Vecchio went back to administrative functions, hence the name Old Palace, Vecchio meaning old. Today it houses Florence's city government alongside museum spaces. The Medici dynasty ruled Florence and Tuscany for nearly 3 centuries from the 1400s until 1737. Their end was quiet. The last Medici ruler, Anna Maria Luisa de' Medici, died without an heir. With her death, the Medici line ended. But she made one final decisive move. Before her death, she signed the Patto di Famiglia, an agreement that ensured the Medici art collections, palaces, and treasures would remain Florence's forever, never removed or sold off to foreign powers. It was an extraordinary act of civic loyalty from a family that had once ruled absolutely, and they secured Florence's legacy as we see it today. There is a secret tour of Palazzo Vecchio that many visitors don't know about. Palazzo Vecchio offers a secret passages tour that takes you off the main route into the hidden infrastructure of power. Narrow staircases, concealed corridors, trapdoors, small rooms between the walls. You move above the ceilings, behind the frescoes, walking the same routes used by rulers, guards, and servants. You see hidden prison cells, private chambers, the mechanisms that allowed leaders to observe without being seen. One of the most remarkable stops is the studiolo of Francesco I, a windowless, jewel-like room hidden behind false panels. Every surface is covered with paintings, cabinets, and symbolism. It's just as secretive as you think it would be. The tour strips away the pageantry and shows how Florence actually functioned. Again, this needs to be booked in advance. Outside of Palazzo Vecchio is the Loggia dei Lanzi. This is an open-air sculpture gallery designed to display art publicly. Here you'll see Benvenuto Cellini's Perseus with the head of Medusa. The sculpture was a symbolic message to the people of Florence. Defiance would be crushed. Authority would be enforced. Our next stops need to be the Uffizi and the Galleria dell'Accademia. The Uffizi museums began as offices, commissioned by Cosimo I Medici in 1560 and designed by none other than Giorgio Vasari. It was built to consolidate Florence's administrative functions under one roof. Uffizi literally means offices. Over time, the Medici family filled the upper floors with their art collection, but by the 18th century it had become a museum, one of the first in Europe to open to the public. Botticelli's The Birth of Venus and Primavera are here, Leonardo da Vinci's Annunciation, Michelangelo's Doni Tondo, Caravaggio's Bacchus. This is Florence showing you exactly what was created and valued in its own town. We were very glad that we got our tickets to see the David in the Galleria dell'Accademia ahead of time. There were many people in line. Book ahead. It's worth it. The statue is over 5 meters tall, carved from a single block of Carrara marble. Michelangelo was 26 when he started it. The David stands in contrapposto, weight on one leg and the other relaxed. His face is turned toward the unseen Goliath. He's not triumphant, he's thinking. The tension is stillness. You see the veins in his hand, the tendons in his neck, the focus in his eyes. Next, we need to visit the Ponte Vecchio and a couple of churches. The Ponte Vecchio is Florence's oldest bridge, first built in Roman times and rebuilt in 1345 after a flood. What makes it unusual is the shops built directly onto it. Originally, butchers and tanners worked here. In 1593, Ferdinando I de' Medici evicted them due to the smell and installed goldsmiths and jewelers instead. These shops still remain today. During World War II, the Ponte Vecchio was the only bridge in Florence the Germans did not destroy. The Basilica of Santa Croce is Florence's pantheon. Michelangelo is buried here. Galileo Galilei, Niccolò Machiavelli. Dante has a cenotaph, though he's buried in Ravenna. Exiled from Florence and never pardoned. Walking through Santa Croce, you walk through Florence's intellectual and artistic legacy made permanent. San Lorenzo was the Medici family church, and with Michelangelo's new sacristy containing the tombs of Lorenzo and Giuliano de' Medici, The sculptures are allegorical day and night, dawn and dusk, figures reclining on the sarcophagi, bodies twisting in melancholy. Michelangelo carved power at rest. For many visitors, Florence doesn't begin at the Duomo, it begins at the train station, so I want to name the associated church. Santa Maria Novella is the church that sits directly across from Santa Maria Novella train station. And for countless travelers, this is the first church you see. The facade of Santa Maria Novella is a masterpiece in early Renaissance design, completed by Leon Battista Alberti in the 15th century. It's calm, mathematical, and perfectly proportioned. Green and white marble form precise geometric patterns. Inside, the church reveals layers of art and theology. Most visitors head straight for the Holy Trinity by Masaccio, one of the first paintings in history to use true linear perspective. Standing in front of it, you're watching the Renaissance being born in real time. Space becomes believable, figures occupy volume, and the illusion was revolutionary. Santa Maria Novella belongs to the Dominicans, an order deeply tied to scholarship, preaching, and intellectual discipline. I want to also mention the gorgeous cloisters. I love the cloisters, and these are incredible. Many visitors miss them and only see the church. Behind the church are two remarkable cloisters that reveal how this complex actually functioned as a place of daily life, learning, and reflection. The most significant is the Chiostro Verde, or green cloister, named for the green earth pigment used in its frescoes. Painted in the 14th century, the scenes depict episodes from Genesis. The color palette is restrained, almost austere, and that's intentional. This was a space designed for meditation. Also, there is the Chiostro dei Morti, a more solemn space that once served as a burial area for the friars. It reinforces the Dominican focus on discipline, humility, and intellectual preparation for mortality. The cloisters matter because they show Florence in balance. Public brilliance on the outside, quiet order on the inside. If you have more than a day in Florence, one additional site with extraordinary historic value is the Pitti Palace. The Pitti Palace was the principal residence of the Medici family after they moved their court from Palazzo Vecchio. Purchased by Cosimo de' Medici in 1549, it marked a decisive shift in how the family ruled. Today, the palace houses multiple museums, but its heart remains the Palatine Gallery, where art is displayed not chronologically or academically, but how it was lived with. Paintings hang floor to ceiling in richly decorated rooms surrounded by gilded frames, frescoed ceilings, and silk wall coverings. You'll find Raphael, Titian, Rubens, Caravaggio. The palace later became the residence of the ruling families that followed the Medici, including the Habsburg-Lorraine dynasty, briefly as the kings of unified Italy. Each layer adds a sense of the accumulated power of this palace. Behind the palace is the Boboli Gardens. The gardens were designed for leisure in a modern sense. Terraced paths on the hillside create symmetry. Sculptures emerge at planned intervals. Grottos, fountains, and shared corridors guide your movement. The gardens became a model for court gardens across Europe, influencing later designs at Versailles and beyond. As you walk deeper into the Boboli, Florence begins to recede, the noise fades, and the city reveals itself gradually from above. There are great viewpoints in the hills. Boboli offers the best panoramic views of the city, but more importantly, gives you context. I also want to mention that if you buy tickets for the Pitti Palace, it's a separate ticket to go to the gardens, and you can buy them ahead of time, of course. For day trips, Florence is absolutely surrounded by extraordinary historic towns, and it's one of the great gifts of this region is how accessible it all is. Trains and buses radiate outward from Florence in every direction, making it easy to explore Tuscany without a car and without stress. In this episode, I've chosen just a handful of places, but there are so many more that deserve their own episodes. I didn't have time to include Arezzo, Livorno, Grosseto, Prato, Pistoia, Carrara, Volterra, Viareggio, or San Gimignano, and Cortina, forever linked in many minds for Under the Tuscan Sun. Each town carries its own history, character, and rhythm, and I promise we'll return to them in future episodes, because Tuscany isn't a place you can just cover in one episode. Our first town is one of my favorites, and that's Siena. I actually took the bus from Florence, The bus station is right across from Santa Maria Novella train station, and I found the bus to be easiest from city center to city center. It was about 90 minutes uh, by train, but on the bus it was only an hour and 15 minutes faster. Siena is one of the best preserved medieval cities in Europe, and it feels different the moment you arrive. I visited Siena with a friend who's a local named Cecilia. We started first in Piazza del Campo. This is the heart of Siena and one of Europe's greatest public squares. Shell-shaped, sloping inward like a bowl, built intentionally this way to draw people together. Twice a year, it becomes the stage for the Palio, a bareback horse race rooted in neighborhood rivalry that predates modern Italy itself. Facing the piazza is Siena's town hall, Piazza Pubblico, built as a declaration of civic pride. Inside, Ambrogio Lorenzi's frescoes of good and bad government are among the earliest political artworks in Europe, showing how leadership affects daily life. The tower is called Torre di Mangia. The tower was built intentionally shorter than Florence's, a symbolic refusal to compete directly. Your next stop should be the Duomo di Siena. The cathedral is Gothic drama at its most extravagant. Black and white marble stripes, a facade layered with sculpture. Inside, the floor is inlaid with biblical stories revealed seasonally, turning the church itself into a teaching tool. The Duomo is another site. I recommend getting tickets. You can climb the dome. You can visit the Duomo and the museum inside, but tickets in advance are recommended. Another site is Santa Maria della Scala. Once a hospital for pilgrims, orphans, and the poor, this complex, across from the Duomo, reveals how medieval Siena cared for people. Frescoed halls tell stories of charity, medicine, and faith working together. Our next town is going to be Lucca. It's about an hour and 20 minutes by train or an hour by car. In Lucca, one of its main sites is the Renaissance city walls. The walls completely encircle the historic center, and they were never breached. Today they form a tree-lined promenade used for walking and cycling. Defensive architecture turned into civic space. The Duomo di San Martino is Lucca's cathedral, and it holds the Volto Santo, a wooden crucifix venerated since the Middle Ages. The facade is asymmetrical, reflecting centuries of gradual construction rather than one grand settlement. Another church you'll want to visit is San Michele in Foro. Built on the site of the Roman Forum, the church connects Lucca's ancient past to its medieval identity. The facade is layered with arches, light, and sculpture. One of Lucca's most unusual sites is the tower, called the Torre Giungi. It has oak trees growing at the top. It's a reminder that power here was personal, but also rooted in community and nature. The Piazza del Anfiteatro was built directly over the Roman amphitheater. It's an oval-shaped square that preserves the ancient entertainment architecture beneath everyday life. Our last day trip will be none other than Pisa with its leaning tower. Pisa was one of Italy's greatest maritime republics, alongside Genoa, Venice, and Amalfi. Its wealth came from the sea, its power came from ships, and its downfall came when both were taken away. The turning point for Pisa was the Battle of Meloria in 1284. Pisa's decline began decisively in 1284 after this battle. It was a naval battle fought against Genoa, its fiercest rival. Genoa crushed the Pisan fleet. Dozens of ships were destroyed or captured. Thousands of Pisan sailors were killed or taken prisoner. Pisa lost not just the battle, but its ability to dominate Mediterranean trade, and the city never fully recovered its naval strength. Pisa is about 1 hour by train, and there are frequent direct trains. In Pisa, you want to see, of course, the Leaning Tower, the cathedral, the baptistry, and Campo Santo. They form a unified architectural statement in Piazza dei Miracoli. This was Pisa declaring its wealth, faith, and global reach through marble. The cathedral blends classical, Byzantine, and Islamic influences, reflecting Pisa's Mediterranean trade network. The baptistry is the largest in Italy, famous for its acoustics. The Campo Santo Monumentale. Legend says that soil was brought back from Golgotha during the Crusades. Frescoes once covered the walls depicting life, death, and salvation. And don't forget the Arno riverfront. Pisa reveals itself as a university town with a lived-in rhythm. Back in Florence, there are some unique experiences you might consider adding to your itinerary. The first one is a Tuscan cooking class with a market visit. One of the most immersive ways my husband and I have come to understand Italy is through its food. We took a cooking class that began in the San Lorenzo market. We chose tomatoes, bread, olive oil, Back in the kitchen, we learned how Tuscan cooking works. Simple dishes, few ingredients, technique over complexity. Pasta was prepared by hand, as well as ribollita and papa al pomodoro, dishes that only make sense when you understand that Tuscan food is meant to nourish, nothing flashy. A second experience is a fresco or gilding workshop. Florence didn't just produce great art, it produced great artisans. Small workshops around the city offer introductions on Renaissance techniques, including buon fresco, gold leaf gilding, egg tempera painting. You work with plaster, pigment, and tools just like they were used centuries ago. You leave with a deeper respect for what it meant to create the beauty around this town. Another tradition is perfume and apothecary. There are perfume experiences in Florence. Florence isn't just a city of art and architecture, it's also one of Italy's great fragrance capitals. For centuries, Florence has blended botanical essences, herbal remedies, and luxury perfumes, a tradition that continues today in some of the most atmospheric ateliers. If you're looking for a sensory experience that goes beyond sightseeing, these perfume workshops and historic shops offer a beautiful way to connect with Florence on a more intimate level. Fil Toscana Perfume Creation Workshop is tucked away on Via del Sole. Fil Toscana offers hands-on workshops where you can craft your own signature scent. It's intimate, personal, and perfect if you want a quiet, artisanal experience guided by an expert. There's also Aquaflor Firenze. Firenze, by the way, is the name of Florence in Italian. I don't know why we call cities not by their local name. Located in Santa Croce, Aquaflor is one of Florence's most elegant perfume houses. Inside is vaulted rooms, and you can take part in a custom fragrance session or a joint scent-making class surrounded by shelves of rare essences and botanicals. It's refined, immersive, and deeply Florentine. There's also Antica Sperizia Eberistica in San Simone. This historic herbalist shop blends world-class apothecary charm and modern fragrance craft. Workshops here draw on centuries-old Florentine traditions, making it a great choice for travelers who love botanical history more than atmosphere. There's also the Officina Perfumo Farmaceutica di Santa Maria Novella. This is one of the oldest pharmacies in the world. Founded by the Dominican friars in 1221, Santa Maria Novella doesn't offer full workshops, but the experience of visiting is unforgettable. You can explore the frescoed halls, learn about centuries-old formulas used by Katerina de' Medici herself, and enjoy a guided fragrance consultation that feels like you're stepping back in time. Both Get Your Guide and Viter also offer perfume classes and workshops. Florence has been shaping leather into art for centuries, and the tradition is still alive in the city's workshops. If you want to go beyond browsing handbags and jackets, there's a place you can actually work with the artisans. The Scuola di Cuoio. This is Florence's leather school. Hidden behind the Basilica of Santa Croce, the school is one of Florence's most iconic leather workshops. Inside a vaulted former monastery, master craftsmen cut, stitch, and burnish leather by hand, using techniques passed down through generations. Visitors can watch artisans work, learning about tanning traditions that made Florentine leather famous. You can browse pieces that can be customized on the spot, from monogrammed wallets to bespoke belts and bags. It's part workshop, part museum, and one of the most authentic ways to experience Florence's leather heritage. Benhart Firenze offers custom leather jackets. Benhart offers personalized leather experience. Founded by a Florentine artisan who survived a heart transplant, the brand blends craftsmanship with modern style. You can choose your jacket model, leather type, color, and fit, and the team will tailor it to your body right in the shop. It's a rare chance to walk out of Florence with a piece that's literally made for you, stamped 100% made in Italy. Artisan workshops in Oltrarno, across the river in the district, smaller leather studios open their doors to visitors curious about the craft. These workshops specialize in hand-stitched accessories, traditional tooling, and custom embossing. It's quieter, more intimate side of Florence in Florence's leather world. The kind of place where you can talk directly while the maker works on something unique. After-hours experiences in Florence. Florence transforms after dark, when the crowds thin and the city settles into a quieter rhythm. Some of the most iconic landmarks open their doors for rare after-hours experiences. These tours offer a chance to see Florence in a way most visitors never do, in silence with exclusive access. The After Hours Duomo Tour, Dome and Terraces. One of the most extraordinary experiences in Florence is the After Hours Tour of the Duomo. Once the cathedral closes to the public, a small group is allowed inside to explore the nave in complete silence. A guide leads you beneath Brunelleschi's massive dome, and you can stand alone with the frescoes towering above. From here you climb to an area normally off limits and step out onto exterior walkways for sweeping nighttime views of Florence. It's a peaceful, dramatic visit. Some after-hours tours also include a ticket that lets you return to the baptistry, Opera del Duomo Museum, and the crypt of Santa Reparata on your own time. It's a great option if you want to take a deep dive into the entire Duomo complex. These tours can be offered by several companies, including Get Your Guide, Viator, Walks, and Devour Tours. After Rome and Venice, Florence is the third most visited city in Italy, and there's a reason for that. This city is where history did not happen quietly. The Duomo rising impossibly above the skyline, Piazza della Signoria and Palazzo Vecchio, where power was claimed, challenged and reshaped. The Medici, whose influence reached far beyond Florence and still defines the art and culture of Europe. The drama here was real. Decisions were made in public. Art was political. Architecture was ambition made visible. Florence rewards return visits because you can't see everything in one trip. The beauty draws you in, but the depth keeps pulling you back. Every time you return, something sharpens, a detail you missed, a place that you didn't see. And that's why people come back. If you enjoyed this episode, there's an associated blog on my website at katerinaferrara.com with additional details, photos, and information to help you plan your visit. If you have questions about this episode or suggestions for future destinations, I'd love to hear from you. Email me at katerina@katerinaferrara.com or use the contact link on my website. Please consider signing up for my free monthly newsletter filled with tips, more secret experiences, and of course, festivals, which are my passion. Thank you for traveling with me. This is Immersion Travel Italy. Let the cities tell their stories.